Hi, welcome back to Henry and Simon. This is our 9th episode in the interview series, and today's guest is Christoph Sollich. Christoph is a Berlin-based pitch doctor, pitch coach, and startup comedian. We had so much fun talking to him about how he got involved with startups, and he gave really valuable ideas on how companies can better shape their message and avoid some of the most common pitfalls. Check this out if you want to improve your startup presentation, or indeed if you just want to get a better idea of how startups work. And as always, come to henryandsimon.com if you want to hear more interviews on startups, entrepreneurship and innovation, or just tune into our weekly startup digests with hot headlines from the last 7 days. So Christoph, it's great to have you on. I've seen from your LinkedIn that you've been, it seems, around the startup scene for about 11 years. Is that correct? And I was very curious as to how you managed to kind of morph yourself into this pitch doctor and, of course, startup comedian. That I really want to get to the bottom of. But has it been 11 years, and how have you changed into this pitch doctor? When did that all happen?
Yeah, okay, so 11 years sounds about right. I would have said 12 or 13, but 11 might be it if that's what my
We'll take
LinkedIn
that,
profile says. I ended up in a startup by complete accident in the beginning. I studied business. I wanted to go into advertising. That was always my goal. And I did after university. I started working as a copywriter in a big advertising agency in Germany. And then after a little bit doing that, I realized it wasn't what I wanted to keep doing for the rest of my life. So I was basically just looking for, okay, what's next? And then these two people contacted me on Xing, which is the German version of LinkedIn. And they just said, hey, we're co-founding this startup together. Do you want to be our first employee? And I think at that point, I actually went on Google and I checked what a startup actually is, like what that means, because I hadn't heard of it. It wasn't part of my studies. It was never a topic that I had gotten into. So when I realized what it was and I met them and I really liked their energy and they wanted to do something cool and they had an investor already. So I was like, okay, this looks like I could do it. And they gave me a bunch of things to do with, they had no marketing background at all. I was the marketing person. So I had a lot of influence on what we were trying to build and how we were marketing it. So I really enjoyed doing that and immediately fell in love with the concept of startups. So very quickly I realized, okay, startups is probably what I want to be around for the next couple of years at least. And then that startup obviously failed within like half a year. The investor, the CEO got into a fight, CEO got kicked out, startup got moved to Frankfurt. I didn't want to go to Frankfurt, so I was gone. But then I really quickly happened to get into the next startup. And from that one on, that was sort of the first serious one that I worked for maybe 2 years on. That's when I realized, okay, startups, I'm going to be around that for probably the rest of my career. I worked in a couple of startups, always doing marketing. Then I started freelancing. So I consulted for multiple startups at the same time, always helping them set up their marketing in the beginning, find their first customers, find like a tonality, stuff that I knew from my background as a copywriter in advertising. And I did that for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years probably. And at some point, I was doing a big consulting project with other people here from Berlin. We flew to Zurich every week um, to work for the Swiss Railway Company and help them launch innovative projects. And I hated it. I, I mean, that's maybe a little bit strong, but it was getting old. And I was enjoying myself. Every Tuesday to Thursday, we were in Zurich. And at the same time, I went to a startup weekend myself and I pitched our idea at that startup weekend. And the idea was really bad. But the pitch was really good. I think I can say that with no modesty at all. So people afterwards said to me, hey, that was an amazing pitch. Could you teach people how to pitch like that? And that's the first time when I offered somebody to do that. And I realized that I really enjoyed it and I kept doing it. And so during my consulting Tuesday to Thursday, I was always looking forward to the Mondays and the Fridays because that's when I was doing pitch coaching. So pretty quickly, I decided I will stop doing the Zurich thing and instead focus on pitch coaching. And because the two people that asked me about it at that startup weekend, they told other people, accelerator programs, incubators, um, pitch events. So very quickly, I got more interest from more people, and I really enjoyed doing it, and I still enjoy doing it. So this is now what, 8 years ago, maybe. So 8 years later, I still enjoy doing pitch coaching because it's always different entrepreneurs working on different cool ideas, sometimes stupid sounding ideas, but you never know. Those might turn out the best ones. So it's always a new thing. I always work on the pitch, but it's always a new thing. So that's how you end up being a pitch coach. Pitch doctor, I didn't even come up with that myself. That was an early coachee of mine who called me pitch doctor, and I was like, oh, I like it.
Hmm.
So I took that. Wasn't even my idea either. So none of it was my idea. It just happened to me. The startup comedian thing is a new thing that was also in the beginning a little bit of an accident, but I always enjoy trying to be funny. And I think in the startup world, we need a little bit of humor because the startup world, we tend to take ourselves very seriously. So I started just doing funny presentations for fake startups. I did a pitch about Berlin that was a little bit popular. People like that. So I put these on YouTube. I started doing them at events. And now for maybe the last year and a half, 2 years, I call myself the world's first, only, and best startup comedian because nobody else does it as far as I know. So I'll always be the best, right? And that's
Definitely.
really
I think people do laugh at me frequently, but unfortunately not in a professional capacity.
not on purpose.
Not on purpose, unfortunately. So it sounds like you've had this, beautiful accidents that got you into, the pitch doctor world and then the startup comedian space. Do you think that Europe, as a group, the startup group, because you would go to the events, the conferences, etc., have we gotten better? Are we getting as close to, for example, our American compatriots in delivering a good, crisp pitch, or do you think that your mission has just begun?
Both. I think we're definitely getting better. If I compare like the first pitch events that I worked for like 8 years ago in Berlin to what's happening today, it's a world of difference. We are a lot better for sure. And also other cities in Europe where I go, it's gotten a lot better, but we're still not where people in the US are. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Um, Mostly it's language, like pitching in what's not your native language is just so much harder. But we do almost like in Berlin, every pitch is in English. And that's obviously something that we could change. We could say, no, we're pitching German now, and then all the foreigners would have tough luck. But then for German native speakers, it would be a lot easier. But we
Indeed.
don't do that because we want to be part of the global ecosystem. So that's one reason. The other reason is education. I think in general, the American education system values presentation, pitching, telling people how great something is a lot more than we do, also culturally. So there's a couple of levels to that, but we've definitely gone up quite a bit since I started doing this. And this is not my thing. It's just people have worked on it a lot. There's other pitch coaches as well. We're not naming any names, obviously, today. They're all like second place, third place, whatever.
I
But
imagine.
there's a lot of people that work on this, and also the founders just put a lot more effort into it. And we'll keep getting better. We'll never probably quite catch up to American standards, but we have some people in Europe that pitch really, really well. And more and more people understand that it's an important skill you need to have, especially if you're trying to raise money from American investors, which is what so many startups in Europe want.
Absolutely. And do you do you see like the main issue in terms of the pitch is that it's it's too long, the pitching, or it's not somehow precise enough? Are we in Europe maybe a bit too focused on the numbers and not on the vision, or indeed do we not use enough humor or whatever to get the message across?
I think it's different things for different people. Some people are really good at telling their story very precisely. Some are good at selling a vision, and then others are not. But the word you said, and I call it the holy grail of pitching, is precision. I think that's one thing that also from the language perspective always comes in. It's so hard if you're not pitching in your native language and you have to tell this complex story, all this stuff you know about your startup in just 3 short minutes, and you have to do it in exactly the right way. That's something that people definitely struggle with. And that's also one place where I think European founders still have to understand how much work needs to go into that. Because an American founder might make it look easy, but they spend a lot of time rehearsing this. They spend a lot of time getting coached on this. And in Europe, a lot of times it's still people show up to my coaching session for like an event and they're like, yeah, I just built these slides and I've never done them. Let's see how long it will take me. And that's obviously for me always a bummer, because I know if you haven't tried this once, then we're not going to be great by tomorrow, whenever the pitch event is. So I think the sort of the effort level is something that still needs to go in there. But yeah, precision is probably the one thing that most people struggle with, and then it depends really on personality. Some people are very good at going out and saying, "Hey, this is a great idea," and then other people are better with numbers. And you always have to find the balance. You have to find the strength of the person, but also make up for their weaknesses.
Right. So how does it work in practical when I, let's just imagine I'm a startup, right? And I'm gonna say to you, Christoph, we are called Henry and Simon, and we pitch it like this: Welcome to Henry and Simon, a podcast interviewing and highlighting independents, creatives, and entrepreneurs. We will try to capture their spirit and enthusiasm, but also get to the truth of how they got to where they are. What would you say? Would you say like, no, it's not good, let's rework it, or would you try to understand our story, or what's the typical
Yeah,
approach?
so the first thing I would always do is I would actually take a couple of step backs, because you can't really talk about a pitch without first understanding what are you trying, question one, what are you trying to achieve with this pitch? And two, who are the people you're talking to?
Right.
So these are always the two questions I ask from people before we even talk about the pitch, before I want to know what they do. I just want to know, who are we thinking about? Who is the recipient of this pitch? And what is the end result? And this is something that a lot of founders don't do. They will show me a pitch. If I wasn't stopping them in the beginning and asking these two questions, they would show me a pitch. And then afterwards, I would ask them, what are you trying to achieve with this pitch? And they'd be like, we don't know. It's like, that's our startup pitch. But there is no startup pitch. There's a pitch to raise money from a specific type of investor. Ideally, you tailor it to a specific person. There is a pitch to get potential partners interested. There's a pitch for everything, but there's no general pitch. So with your pitch, I think it's quite a good pitch. I could assume who it's meant to be for, but we would talk about that first. Who is it really for? What do these people know? What do they like? What are they looking for? What's sort of bugging them? I think one of the things I would maybe change in the pitch is a little bit more of the benefit for the person that's listening to it. Why should I listen to the podcast? What does it give me? Who is it for? But in general, I always start at those two questions. And then what I do is I let people actually write down a couple of things about their startup before we even look at their pitch. So I have a little bit like a PDF that I send to people, and I give it to them and I say, hey, answer these questions. And there's questions like, what is the greatest thing about your startup? What are the three biggest achievements of your startup? How did this startup happen? How did you have the idea? And a couple other questions. And just collecting this material gives us a foundation for the pitch. Because a lot of times people would write something there, what's the coolest thing about your startup? And then it wouldn't be part of the pitch at all. And you would think, why does that happen? But it does happen because people are too close to what they're pitching. So it's really hard for them to like take a step back and look at it from the outside. So if you give them this piece of paper, I do this at the beginning of workshops, I give it to them before we do one-on-one coaching sessions. It just forces them to really quickly jot down what they're thinking about their startup. And, oh yeah, this is really cool. And we've achieved that. And this is the backstory. And here's why we're passionate about it. And with those answers, I can then challenge what they show me, because they will show me their pitch as it is. And I can say, hey, you wrote down, this is the coolest thing about your startup, but I don't see that being the star of the pitch. Shouldn't that be the star of the pitch? Mm-hmm. And then we can work like that, because 95% of the times I work with people, they already have a pitch. Very rarely it's like, we don't have a pitch, tell us how to build one. No, mostly they come in, they say, this is what we're using right now. Then I ask them, what are you using it for? What's the next pitch you're doing? So we know the exact persona. And then we can dive into, okay, what do we need to highlight?
Right, I see. Have you ever had someone who was that bad? I mean, like the spoken word, or like very not made for public speeches?
For sure. But basically, I had one person in my entire career where I would say that was a hopeless case. And I've coached 2,000 startups / corporate entrepreneurship teams, and then a couple more thousand students and whatever. And this was one university student that was in a class of mine, and this one person was just not able to speak in front of people. And but that's out of thousands and thousands of people. At the same time, I've seen people that were horrible, and I'm talking about flat out horrible in the beginning, and then by the end of me working with them, but also just sort of them actually getting into working on how to pitch, they were fine. Like there's people on Berlin startup pitch events right now that I've seen like 4 years ago when they sucked, and today they would think they were born entertainers and they love being on stage, they love talking about their startup. So much is about realizing you can become good at it. And outside of that one person that I've encountered in my career, everybody was able to get at least good at it if you put the work in, and if you understand that it's just a matter of working on it and improving. And with that, I think there's really no excuse. Maybe not everybody can be amazing at pitching, but everybody can be good enough. And that's sort of my claim that I always tell people. There's plenty of good reasons for startups to die, because doing a startup is hard, right? There's stuff like 10 million things can go wrong, but a bad pitch isn't a valid reason to fail, because that's one thing you can really just learn. It's something that you can work on. Anybody can be good enough at pitching. You will still fail for another reason, but please don't fail because of a bad pitch.
I was curious if you were looking at your many years and many thousands of pitches, is there some kind of nonsense around pitching that gets dished out a lot that makes you feel a bit ill? Like, for example, when people talk about an elevator pitch or the 3-minute pitch or the 10 steps or the things that must be in, do you feel that there's some stuff there that's just clearly to get clicks rather than any sort of basis in science and results after your own experience?
I think most of the content that's out there is actually valid, but whenever somebody says this is absolutely the truth when it comes to pitching, that's when I always get skeptical, because I know that if there's some piece of advice out there, for example, don't pitch naked, okay? That's sound advice for 99 out of 100 startups, maybe even 999 out of 1,000 startups. Not pitching naked is a good idea. Putting actual clothes on before you pitch is a good idea. But then there's one startup where exactly that is a great idea, to pitch naked. And I've had the case, it is on YouTube. I've told the guy to pitch naked. He didn't totally have the guts to do it, so he pitched in the Borat outfit, the mankini.
The mankini.
So if you enter mankini pitch on YouTube, you will see that pitch. And that is the proof that for that one person, pitching naked was actually a great idea. So my point is always, look at all the advice, look at all the templates. I'm not a big fan of templates, but most of the time, most of the templates sort of work. It's just that you'll never get to like a really great pitch if you just follow a template without thinking. So take all the advice, follow some of the advice, but think and see, does this actually make sense in my case or not? And a lot of times I'll get people that have worked with a template, and that's fine. But then you need to really go in and say, okay, where do we need to get away from the template to make this better? So the template might get you to 80%, 70%, whatever. But then after that, it's really about, okay, looking at every individual case. So a lot of pitch advice, a lot of it is good, but you have to know when it applies to you. And there's always a couple of cases where it doesn't apply and it leads to something that's not going to work, or that just sometimes you can tell that people have seen this advice online, or they've worked with coaches that are not really specifically pitch coaches, and they just give you this, like, this is the golden rules, you always have to follow them. I just don't believe in that, because I've seen too many cases where it's not true.
And do you have a bit of a sixth sense now for those pitches that are really going to raise the cash and really go forward? Like, do you have after the years, say, okay, this guy or this woman has just something about them that they're just going to succeed in the end?
Yeah, I think that's, people normally ask me if I know which ideas are going to work or not. And to that, I always have to say, no, absolutely not. Because there is very little relationship between a great idea and a great pitch. Like, just because you have a great pitch doesn't mean your idea is much better. So I've actually, over the years, I've become less interested in startup ideas doing this. Because in the beginning, I would go home after coaching 8 teams in a day, and I would be excited, and I would be like, oh, I saw these 2 amazing startups today, and they're totally going to work. but then 3 years later they failed, and I realize it doesn't mean anything if I like the idea the first time I hear it. What I do see, and I've seen more and more, and I do think I've gotten a little bit of a feeling for it, is I believe in people. Because that's the thing. Whenever I thought these were great founders, it didn't matter if I liked the idea or not. Maybe I didn't get the idea. Maybe they weren't sure about the idea yet, but you could tell that these people are really great. That's the ones that were successful. And a lot of times not with the original idea they pitched me, because they changed it, but the best people end up with something that's going to work. So yeah, I think that's something that I will have a feeling after a session where I'm like, these people are really great. They're going to do something, and I'll keep an eye on what they're going to do. And oftentimes it's not their first startup. It's not their second one. Maybe it's their third one. And I think that's actually part of what I like about my job. It's because it's really rewarding. I don't build pitches for people. I teach them how to build a great pitch for themselves. And I always teach them why something needs to be done in a certain way. So I have hundreds of people that failed with the startup I coached them for, but then they can still use what they learned from me with the next startup, the next startup, the next startup. And that's how they just level up. So first startup, yeah, pitching was one problem, but there was others, but then they get better and better at all the different things, including pitching. And then maybe on their fourth, fifth, whatever startup, they become billionaires. And that's fine by me because I get paid by the hour. So they pay me for the education. I don't care if that startup works. I don't get a cut. I just know that I've done something that will actually help them for the rest of their careers, because they become better at pitching, not just that one idea, but any idea they'll ever have to pitch in their lives.
Yeah. So how much do you charge?
That's a very private question, my friend. No, but generally I charge 250 euros an hour. That's my online rate. If you just click on my website, you can book a session for that. You can have half an hour at half that price. Depending on bigger customers, I have sort of packages that I make, but that's sort of the general thing. My approach is I don't want to hold people's hands. So with me, there's no 3 hour sessions. There's no half day. I'm coaching one team. I'm not doing that. For me, it's always an hour. It's an hour. You tell me what you do and where your pitch needs to go. And in that 1 hour, I tell you how you make it a lot better. And then you work on it for a week, right, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I don't care how long it takes you. And then you come back to me and you show it to me again. And so we do probably 3 hours is like the standard format, which would mean that it's still under 1,000 euros for a startup. And by the third time, we are fine tuning. We're talking about specific words, sentences, keywords, key sentences you use in your pitch. And the dirty little secret about me being a fairly successful pitch coach is all the work happens between the sessions. I just give the right sort of impulse. I push people in the right direction. I point out the right problems, and I do it very quickly. And then they think about it and they work on it, and then they come back to me. And almost all the time, second session, they come to me and I'm like, this is awesome. Like I pushed them a little bit and they moved in exactly the right direction, but a lot more than I could ever push them in that 1 hour. So it makes me look really smart. Right. But it also helps the founders because they're like, okay, we just needed to know we're going in the right direction. We don't want to waste 2 weeks on something that doesn't work. With your help, that 1 hour, we get in the right direction. So everybody wins, but it makes me look really smart. And that's what I like about this setup.
Have you noticed much of a drop in business because of the virus, or is it more because you're doing so much online? For example, both you and I would go to events for different reasons, trade shows, conferences, etc. Is that more for you a marketing channel, or are you actually going there to get paid, etc.?
I mean, with the startup comedian thing, it's changed a little bit. I do get paid to do funny presentations at events, and that has obviously taken a huge hit over the last couple of weeks, and it will continue in the next months. Although I have the first people that now say we have these online events coming up, and we still need some like comic relief. We want something that's sort of engaging, because right now everybody who has a startup event or even like a corporate, whatever innovation, something event, everybody's trying to figure out how to make those online events work. And I don't think anybody has done it yet. Everybody's complaining, 8 hours of talks and like a Zoom call. Who wants that? So everybody's looking how to do that. So I do have people asking me about, Can you do funny 5 minutes here, funny 5 minutes there? So that's going to come back once all of those events are put online. But obviously, a lot of stuff just sort of completely got canceled. Um, with the coaching, thankfully, I've already done a lot of online coaching in the past, which was originally it happened because I had clients that just had teams all over the world. I've done big coaching projects for big clients where they were just like, we have people in 40 countries. They're coming to Berlin in the end for a pitch event, and they need to present in teams, but the teams individually aren't in one place. But one person from the team is in Asia and one is in South America. Can you coach them? So years ago, I started doing coaching like that online, and I realized it works really well. The content part of a pitch you can do in a Zoom call, no worries.
Mm-hmm.
The performance part is a lot harder, but that's sort of the second step. So the first step you can always do. So I've been doing a lot of online coaching over the last couple of years, and I've actually, like 2 years ago, I wrote down like my 5-year goals, and one of my 5-year goals was I want to basically not do any in-person coaching anymore where I have to travel somewhere.
Nice.
In Berlin, I'll always do it in person because it's just like, let's meet around the corner, let's have a session. But I don't want to travel to Munich because a coaching day in Munich is an 18-hour day for me to do 8 hours of coaching. If I do 8 hours of online coaching, it's an 8-hour, 5-minute day for me because I walk from the kitchen to my office once and then I walk back. So I have kids, I have families, just so from a stress perspective for me, I always said I want to go to more online coaching. And that obviously has been accelerated a lot through the virus now, because I've had clients where I said, hey, let's do these sessions online. It works really well. And they said, no, come to Munich, come to Düsseldorf, come to wherever. And I said, okay, I'll do it. But now we had to do it online. And I think all of these clients realize it doesn't make much sense. If you have a startup accelerator, why would you have teams fly in from like Canada and Africa and whatever, and they fly to a city in Germany or somewhere in Europe to get coached by people you fly in from other cities in Europe? Why not just everybody stay at home and do this at home? And we save a lot of CO2 emissions. We save a lot of money because I charge more if I have to travel somewhere. If it's an 18-hour day, that costs more than an 8-hour. I'm comfortable in my own chair kind of deal. So I think it's going to make that a lot faster, but thankfully I didn't have to start it because of the virus, but it was already there.
You already had some impetus.
Yeah, I have my final question. So how would I find you if I'm, Googling pitch decks or recommendations, how to pitch? So is Google friendly with you? Or how do you get?
No, because I'm an idiot. I don't put a lot of content out. Okay, I'm an idiot, but I'm also lazy and I'm busy and I have kids and whatever. So there's 10 million excuses. It doesn't matter. For me, I've focused on word of mouth from the start. As I said in the story in the beginning, 2 people asked me. I never put out any, I didn't have a website for probably the first 3 years. I didn't tell anyone I was a pitch coach. It was just those 2 people that started it, and they told more people. So for me, it's always been about that, and it's worked really nicely. Doesn't mean that I shouldn't put out more content, but the content I do put out is my funny content. And that's actually how I've gotten a lot of my clients, because they saw my funny pitch because it was shared around, and they said, oh, this guy, he knows what he's doing, so let's ask him to coach our teams. So that's sort of been my approach, because I don't know, too lazy to just write long blog articles about the 100 rules of pitching, because as I said, all of this stuff is online already. It's just sort of regurgitating it. I'm not into it that much. And people have to realize the 100 rules, you still have to adapt and pick which ones really apply to you. So I always focus on the one-on-one. This is your individual pitch. I don't want to give too much general advice. I do have a couple of videos, but they're always sort of tongue-in-cheek. If people want to add me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to do that, because on LinkedIn, I post my videos where I iron my Adidas jackets. So my Adidas jackets are part of my brand. I always wear bright Adidas jackets every day. People always recognize me by it. And there's videos of me ironing them and giving pitch advice at the same time. So I do stuff like that, and that's what a lot of people find, and then they contact me. Google, generally, I don't know. I haven't Googled me in a while, but if you enter Pitch Doctor, then Oh, my phone just went on because I said Google. That's great. Lovely. No, don't search anything, Google. Okay, cool. No, but still going on
Actually, you
because
know
I
what?
said Google again.
You are on the second place. Yeah, third place, fourth place,
For,
fifth place. Yeah.
for what? What
Pitch
did
doctor,
you?
pitch doctor.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
that's the
yeah,
thing. So
yeah,
Pitch
yeah,
Doctor, you'll find me. My domain is
yeah,
pitchdoctor.com. I'm on Twitter. I'm at Pitch Doctor. So if you know the name, then you'll find
yeah. Right,
me.
right.
But if you don't know the name, if you just enter startup pitch,
Yeah, yeah.
I wouldn't know where I show up. I would hope that if you look for content on LinkedIn about startup pitches, you would find my stuff. If you generally are interested in startups, hopefully you would see my content that's funny about startups. And then you end up at some point you need something with your pitch and
Right.
you know who to go to. So I'm not I'm not big on sort of optimizing SEO or whatever because I feel like I don't have enough time to help all the people that want my help as it is.
Hmm.
And so yeah, getting more leads has never been my main objective.
I see. Yeah.
So just to finish off, Christoph, like in terms of like a call to action, would you just suggest that people, startups, go check out pitchdoctor.com, or do you want to give one or two pieces of advice to aspiring entrepreneurs out there?
Yeah, I think if you really think about your own pitch, the biggest thing is do it. Start getting in front of people and pitch your ideas. Don't feel like you have to hide your ideas from people. Nobody's stealing your idea because most likely it's bad. And plus, everybody has a ton of ideas. Just do it and don't wait until an important pitch to think about it. Because I always get the call, hey, Christoph, can you help us? We have this important investor pitch in 3 days. And we have something, but we haven't really done anything with it. That shouldn't be how it works. You want to do your pitch at smaller meetings, stages, once we have meetings again, events, whatever, but try to pitch to as many people that are not important to you so that you can actually fine tune the pitch and get to a point where it's ready for that big opportunity, because you don't want to be sort of, oh my God, I've never done this. And now I have to like pitch in front of 1,000 investors. We have this investor dinner in Berlin, or used to, maybe they've stopped doing it a couple of years ago. And there was always one, I always got a call because they invited startups really short notice to pitch there. And there was always one startup that wasn't prepared. And they came to me and they said, hey, this is in 3 days. Every investor in Germany is in the room. Please help us. Don't do that. So go out, pitch, and get feedback. Just like you get feedback on your product, get feedback on your pitch, which doesn't mean you pitch to one person and you ask them how to redo your pitch completely, but get as much data as possible. You want feedback from 10 people, 20 people. And if 20 relevant people ask the same question, then you know that you need to answer that question in your pitch. Don't do it because one person asked the question, because they might just be an idiot, okay? And they didn't get it. Everybody else would have gotten it. So do it. Pitch as much as you can. That's my biggest piece of advice. Don't take it lightly. Put the work in. Get feedback. Ask people, hey, can I pitch you this? Can you tell me how I can do it better? Stuff like that. It is something that is not going to be the most important thing about your startup, but it is going to be important. So of course you have to build a great product. Without that, the pitch isn't going to help, but don't be one of the people that fail, although they had a great product. And that's for me the important part. Pitching is so easy compared to all the hard things you have to do in a startup that if you fail because of a bad pitch, it's really a shame.
That's very good advice. Christoph, thank you so much for coming on. Really enjoy that. Very, very educational and fun. Yeah.
Stay healthy. Wash your hands.
You too.
Don't touch anything or anyone. Don't talk to people. Don't go close to them. Stay at home. Stay safe.
It's going to mess up my love life entirely. But anyway, there you go.
Thank you.